My father's a women's rights activist.
Your dad?
Yeah.
Not your mum?
No, Mum, no. Dad wouldn't allow that.
In the long pantheon of rug-pulling, scenario-shifting misdirections, what's the most memorable experience you've had with a plot twist?
Why, she wouldn't even harm a fly.
The 60s had Planet of the Apes, the 70s had Soylent Green, the 80s had The Empire Strikes Back, and then came the 90s, when you couldn't throw a stone without finding out that the stone was your secret twin's time-traveling ghost. Unfortunately, for every gear-shifting revelation, there's a jackknifed juggernaut that stalls out after a bungled narrative left turn. May we never forget when a romantic drama 9/11'd Robert Pattinson, or any one of the split personality cop-outs that followed Fight Club.
The only idea more overused than serial killers is multiple personality.
For a while, 2022's Don't Worry Darling looked like a boilerplate period drama, one where all the shocking moments were happening behind the scenes. Then, amidst the he said, she said publicity circus, people got to see the end result of all the fuss. Lurking beneath all the cul-de-sacs and kitsch, there were hidden depths meant to astound. I say meant because the twist here doesn't just disappoint. It pulls up the roots of potential and salts the earth for every scene, theme, and motif that surrounds it.
Whose world is it? Ours! Whose world is Ours! It? Whose world is Alice! It? Go!
Alice, a stay-at-home housewife in a 1950s desert town, starts to question everything and everyone following a series of strange visions and startling encounters. Every day, when all the men disappear to their clandestine corporate jobs, Alice is left to ponder what she's doing here and why she can't seem to leave.
It's a different way. And we only have each other.
Why are we here? We shouldn't be here.
By its very definition, i.e. the introduction of a radical change in the direction or expected outcome of the plot, a twist's function is to catch the audience off guard, reshaping how the overall arc of events is perceived. Don't Worry Darling blows the punchline before it's even told the joke. Just 10 minutes into its 2-hour runtime, and without appropriately establishing the brick-and-mortar reality of the world, the movie starts telegraphing the artificiality of it. There is no slowly unfurling psychic disconnect, no spiraling unease. Alice suspects this whole thing's a ruse pretty much from the get-go. Earthquakes rock the foundations of this blissful existence. Rogue airplanes tear through the sky with enigmatic abandon. Eggs crack open to show their barren insides. Walls start closing in, figuratively and literally. But why?
Please. What's actually happening?
Why the surreal asides? Why the cloak and dagger husbands? Why the insistent proclamations that everything's wrong and nothing's right? Between the stabs of strangeness and repetitious choruses of women encouraged to keep their homes clean and tongues quiet, the first 2 acts felt like being repeatedly sent an invite to my own surprise party. The surprise is spoiled, I know it's gonna happen and who's gonna be there, I just don't know the dress code.
Oh, guys, go.
Oh, here we
Come
go.
on, yeah, you should go in front.
Well, here it is.
Get ready, everybody. He's about to do something stupid.
Drumroll, please. Turns out this is all a simulation created by a present-day incel-adjacent group of internet weirdos for the sole purpose of keeping women pacified and in place within a virtual world. Alice is strapped to a bed in a shitty apartment and brainwashed to conform to this 1950s facade because Harry Styles listened to one too many Jordan Peterson podcasts and decided women shouldn't have jobs. Every time we've watched the men drive off to work, they're actually leaving the simulation to earn enough money in the real world to pay for their Leave It to Beaver second life.
What you just said is one of the most insanely idiotic things I have ever heard. At no point in your rambling, incoherent response were you even close to anything that could be considered a rational thought. Everyone in this room is now dumber for having listened to it.
It's just the Matrix as coded by the kind of chuds that think pronouns are worse than the bubonic plague. This asinine reveal isn't just a plagiarized, lazy, and ludicrous piece of nonsense. It renders every scene before and after its unveiling incoherent, contradictory, or outright monstrous. What about those tremors, that aircraft, the eggshells, and these constricting walls? Oh, they're all meaningless. Everyone a question asked and never answered, shown and then never discussed again.
And you sit there like a spoiled brat, demanding answers to questions you've made up.
Couple those hastily abandoned threads with the artificial reality angle, and all that empty imagery becomes outright farcical. Oh, maybe Harry Styles forgot to download more RAM and it broke breakfast.exe and booted up Flight Sim 95 by accident?
What did you do?
As someone who rarely gives a rat's ass about plot holes, let's have a quick rundown of just some of the ways Don't Worry Darling makes the suspension of disbelief absolutely impossible.
Florence, we can stop it!
Have you lost your mind?
Why would the architect of all this make it so that if you die here, you die in real life, when we've been shown the setup is just an Oculus Rift by way of Clockwork Orange? How is it that the most advanced technological leap since the combustion engine is under the sole stewardship of 70 or so sex offenders? Why do the men leave the simulation in the daytime to go work in the real world, so they can pay to return to the simulation and just go to sleep? Oh, and if Alice, a beautiful, white, American respected surgeon went missing, there'd be minute-to-minute news coverage, social media campaigns, and police knocking down the door to her apartment before her boyfriend could even close his incognito windows.
No, I need it.
This is the kind of low-hanging cinema sins idiocy that shouldn't make it past the first treatment, let alone the final cut. But the problems here are far bigger than these sci-fi inconsistencies and eye-rolling oversights.
I'm curious to hear where she's going with this.
When Don't Worry Darling's dissonance isn't dumbfounding, it's absolutely repugnant.
Ha!
As Adrienne Horton writes in her excellent editorial for The Guardian, there's a clear discrepancy between what we're told is happening and what we actually see, a difference between the official narrative and actual material. During the promotional cycle for the film, director and co-writer Olivia Wilde stated that the humanity and humility of Styles' performance was intended to show this man isn't insecure about his masculinity, and he's making himself the equivalent to his wife. He's painted as a man more than happy to step up in the kitchen and go down in the bedroom. So, even before we learn he's a lecherous monster,
I gave you all of this, Alice!
The creative visionary guiding this is explicitly telling us the exact opposite. Wilde has also been adamant that this production was about exploring and advocating for female pleasure, of not shying away from the clitoral or cunnilingual, to sell and celebrate the moaning, twitching delight of a sexually satisfied Alice.
We're having fun.
I live next door. You wouldn't believe the things I've heard. It's like they're on a perpetual honeymoon.
With all that authorial intent in mind, let's remember that every single instance of apron-wearing charm and ravenous ecstasy we're seeing is the spousal rape of a cognitively impaired, unconscious prisoner.
We desperately don't want Frank to be able to get in between these two who we really want to stay together.
Wait.
What?
Then there's the clumsiness at the core of how this charade tries to delineate and define patriarchal power dynamics.
We men, we ask a lot. We ask for strength, a shoulder to cry on, food at home.
As anyone currently living on the right side of history knows, sexist thinking and male entitlement is layered and pervasive. From the well-meaning but regressively naive, all the way up to the violent, hellish woman haters.
Boom in her face, then grip her up by the neck. Like, shut up, bitch!
It's a mentality that comes in different forms and from different factions, with varying levels of volatility. The reveal in Don't Worry Darling basically says this backwards, antiquated societal conditioning that's as old as time is really just down to a few bad apples, that misogynists are extremists, and that our culture of toxic masculinity is but a minuscule fringe of a forum-dwelling few.
I'm part of something important, Alice.
Rather than omnipresent, everyday, and infinitely layered.
We are lucky to be here!
Once the cat's out the bag and we see these dapper gents are actually unwashed Discord moderators, the character played by Wilde herself leads us into the finale on yet another sour, antithetical note that irreparably undermines the film's intended message.
Everything's fine. It's okay.
We find out that Bunny has been voluntarily living in this abusive, ungodly nightmare because it allows her to have a sun-kissed life with her children who tragically died in the real world, both of whom have been perfectly recreated here with artificial intelligence that's completely indistinguishable from her real kids.
Bunny, your kids aren't real. They are. Kids aren't real.
No, they are. They're real to me. They're real to me, Alice, because
here they're alive.
With this, Don't Worry Darling paints women as willing participants in their own oppression.
I chose this.
Wilde effectively reinforces the gender essentialist lie that freedom and life are utterly meaningless for a woman without children, and being comatose and sexually assaulted is a small price to pay to hear someone call you mommy. Then there's the dumbfounding crux of this plot point. If these maniacal dweebs are capable of populating their virtual oasis with perfect human facsimiles, why bother capturing and imprisoning real people? It'd make more thematic sense if these women were sophisticated programs that have grown self-aware, or mind-mapped digital duplicates a la the USS Callister episode of Black Mirror. Then we'd be watching these objectified, masturbatory models of patriarchal ideals, building and reclaiming the agency they've been denied since birth. In doing so, rejecting the programming of emasculated chauvinists. As it stands, there's little or no empowerment to be had for these living, breathing, housebound wives. Even Alice's eventual escape isn't achieved through superior intellect or an aspirational burst of independence. It's because Pine and his Victory Project cohorts cock things up just enough for her to get by them. Alice's epiphany that unlocks her memory only occurs because the men trigger it with electroconvulsive therapy. She's only afforded the chance to figure things out and then flee because Pine sees some sadistic sport in it. She doesn't defeat the villainous mastermind, he's undone by a one-dimensional bitter wife who intends to take over this sexist dungeon because, again, Don't Worry Darling repeatedly states that women are responsible for their own persecution.
It's my turn now.
Our heroine's journey to reclaim her physical and mental autonomy is paved not by ingenuity or understanding, but by happenstance and a few predatory lads who didn't have the foresight to stress test their security system. Alice escapes because the men forgot to put a password on the exit.
Fuck!
With any allegorical edge blunted and broken by the inclusion and implementation of this living in a simulation shtick, it's worth asking, how would this all hold together if we eliminated the twist altogether?
Go. You have to go.
What if Don't Worry Darling had just been a story set in the 1950s? A time in our past when men had returned from World War II to find a dramatic shift in the professions and positions women now occupied, with many now trained and qualified as engineers, accountants, mechanics, and labourers. There's an inherent tension to be found between an evolving sense of autonomy and the societal expectation that the supposed gentler sex should surrender their jobs and just shuffle back to the homestead.
I worked all the time!
I wanted to work! I loved working! What?
As a drama about mid-century women cut off from the outside world, even the hollow imagery and trivial pretensions suddenly start to make sense when viewed from the gaslit perspective of a woman on the verge. All those earthquakes become a pathetic fallacy for a society built on broken foundations. The red airplane, a sign that life exists beyond this desert of servitude. Unfilled eggshells, a subconscious refusal to be seen as an incubator for babies strapped to a biological clock. The walls closing in with the stifling claustrophobia of dead-end suburbia. No misguided attempts at forcing a character piece into a convoluted sci-fi hole, no inadvertently hideous moral implications or contradictory accounts, just a classic tale cut from contemporary cloth.
No one asks any questions. We can't stay here anymore, Alice.
Now, tell me how all of that is improved by a heinous attempt at the yassification of Inception, or by trying to answer the question, what if M. Night Shyamalan directed the Hank Scorpio episode of The Simpsons?
My goodness, what an idea. Why didn't I think of that?
Don't Worry Darling's out-of-sorts Eden is exquisitely rendered and immaculately built. Dragging all those raw materials uphill, there's the generational talent of Florence Pugh and the charismatic serpentine smarm of Chris Pine. And for what?
I was expecting so much more from you.
The rug pull on which everything hinges creates a quantum singularity of plot holes, contradictions, and contrivances from which not even the light of all this aesthetic splendour can escape. There are good twists, bad twists, and twists that are so silly I can't help but smile. Don't Worry Darling's monumental revelation isn't a triumphant turn or even a late-in-the-day letdown. It's abject stupidity dressed up as substance. A moment that could have defined the film, but instead utterly destroys it. Some watermelon sugar for our Patreon producers Jennifer C, Claire MD, Becky O, Scared Confusion, Jake R, and Nicholas Lerevere. And thank God we've still got Booksmart for all these amazing folks who support us over on Patreon. So what did you make of Don't Worry Darling and its twist, and what are some of the major narrative left turns that absolutely ruined a film for you? Like, subscribe and share these videos wherever you can, as it really helps us out, and if you're in a position to do so, check out our Patreon at the link in the description below to get your name in the credits, sign up to the In Frame Out Film Club, and join our private Discord. As always, thank you for watching. Until next time, this is In Frame Out.